All right. So today we are going to talk about all the different elements of writing that you can find on the APUSH exam that you're taking on Thursday. All right. We're going to look at the SAQ, the DBQ, and the LEQ. So the short answer question, the document-based question, and the long essay question. All right. We'll start with the short answer question. The short answer question, you have to write 3 of them. So you're going to write question number 1 and question number 2. Those are mandatory. And then on question 3 and 4, you'll get a choice between 3 and 4. Okay. So when we look at the questions are different. All right. Question 1 will always be a secondary source that you'll have to analyze. All right. You'll interpret it. So for example, these 2 historians, that's what secondary source is a historian. Or some sort of person who is interpreting a past event. These 2 historians are arguing over what a robber baron was. Okay, and your job is to be able to read it, figure out what their argument is, and then talk about the difference and whether or not and facts that might back up either one. Question 2 will be a primary source analysis. Now, sometimes they'll give you textual primary sources like these and ask you to compare them, but most likely they're going to give you a visual source like this one, a political cartoon or a lithograph or something, and ask you to look at the author's perspective, ask you to back it up. No matter what, on question 1 and 2, you'll have to basically analyze what the argument of the source is, and then you have to bring in facts, content that backs up those arguments. Okay. Then question 3 or 4, again, you get to choose one or the other, will be presented to you without stimulus. So it may be that they present it to you like this, where it's a comparison of Spanish and English colonial societies and and then you're just going to compare them. With 3 and 4, there is no stimulus. And again, all of this is centered on, can you tell the content? Now with 3 and 4, they don't want content to be as big of an issue. They want to see your ability to answer using a historical thinking skill. And so pick the one that you feel most comfortable with. So for example, if we were given this question, briefly explain one similarity between the goals of the Spanish and the English, briefly explain one difference between the goals of the English and the Spanish, and then explain the difference and how that changed those societies. When you get down to it, you must make sure that you're bringing in a fact with each one. And we'll look at a sample here in a second. The biggest issue that I see with kids and students writing the SAQs is that you'll give the fact, but you won't explain how it actually answers the question. All right. And that how and why, the explanation, that one extra sentence always kind of makes or breaks it. And with these, it's either you get the point or you don't get the point. There's no partial points here. Reminder, this is not an essay, so whenever you write it, make sure that you differentiate between A, B, and C. You do not want the readers to have to decide whether you're answering part A, B, or C. You tell them what you're answering. Use complete sentences, no bullet pointing. All right, but make sure that you answer the question, be specific, and then expand on the why. Okay, so here's an example of that non-stimulus one. Prior to 1700, both the Spanish and the English established colonies with the goal of religious expansion. Boom, they've answered the question that one of the similarities was both had the goal of religious expansion. Then they gave you specifics. The Spanish were Catholic while the English were Protestant. Done. Check. You got the point. Part B. And see how they differentiate. That was part A, now this is part B. The English and Spanish differed when interacting with Native Americans. An example, the Spanish forced labor from the Native Americans, while the English just forced them out of their land. So the difference between settler colonialism of English and the encomienda system of the Spanish, and the mission system of the Spanish. And then you take that difference and you explain how it changed the society. So for example, the treatment of Native Americans led to the encomienda system in the Spanish that led to mixed racial society, while the settler colonialism of the English led to a primarily exclusively white, Calvinist community, and not one that integrated with Native Americans. So for each one of these, they've given you a fact, and then they've explained how it answers the question. So that is your first writing part. You'll do that right after the multiple choice. It's worth 20% of your score. All right, and you'll have 40 minutes. The next writing thing that you'll do after the break is a DBQ, a document-based question. This is worth 25% of your score. You get 1 hour to write it, and there's no choice here. You have to write the DBQ they give you. Now, with the DBQ they'll give you has 7 documents. Now, in those 7 documents, and it has a prompt. Make sure that you read and understand the prompt. For example, if the prompt was about how ideas of independence changed from 1763 to 1783, know that that's what it's asking you. Because it's not going to say, how did this do this? It'll say, evaluate the extent to which ideas of independence changed from 1763 to 1783. And your question is, how much did it change, if it changed at all? That's a change in continuity over time essay. Then, once you've read the prompt, then read the documents. Make sure as you read them that you are thinking about HIP, that you're thinking about historical context, you're thinking about intended audience, you're thinking about point of view of the author, or you're thinking about purpose. Also think about some facts that kind of connect them. So if I give you a document that is, that is Hamilton talking about his financial plan, you better be able to tell me elements of that financial plan, right? Or if I give you one that's Roosevelt talking about the Roosevelt corollary, you better be able to say Roosevelt corollary. All right. Also, think about some outside facts. So if I give you a DBQ over the progressives, and nowhere in that progressive DBQ did I put the Meat Inspection Act, the FDA, or the jungle, or anything about the meat crisis of the early 1900s, then that is an outside fact that will help you prove a category, one of them at least. And then once you've read and started analyzing the 7 documents, put them into categories. You're probably going to have 2 documents per category, 2 or 3 documents per category, and then there will be at least one outlier document, one that doesn't really fit with the rest of them. That's your complexity document. They always provide you at least one. Then you're going to develop an argument, a thesis statement, and you're going to make sure that it fully answers the question, so that when you write your first paragraph, you can start the essay off with context, the big broad picture, and then you end that first paragraph with your thesis statement. So if I'm asking you about ideas of independence during 1763 to 1783, my context is this is the road to revolution. And what has happened, what has caused this road to revolution? Well, the end of the French and Indian War. So my context would be shifts in British policies and changes in the mercantile system after the end of the French and Indian War resulted in the end of salutary neglect, the acceleration of taxation, the imposition of other acts on North American colonists. And then you could get into your actual thesis. Although some colonists remained loyal to Britain and were arguing mainly for representation, by 1776, a good 40 to 50%, or a lot of colonists had decided to become independent or started arguing for independence. All right, that would be your first paragraph. And so when you look at a first paragraph that was actually written, this comes from the College Board. This is one of the examples that they gave out. Following the French and Indian War, the British and colonists found themselves facing new or heightened problems that demanded immediate solutions. As a response to their accumulation of new and massive debt, the English ended their period of salutary neglect on their colonies, which provoked strong antagonism from the colonial people who had become accustomed to a greater source of freedom. That's all your context. Done. Check. 1 point. Although most colonists identified in the beginning of the American Revolution as part of the British people and sought only greater representation, the continued contention over economic policies and political autonomy forced many colonists to strive for a new identity as an independent America. Boom, that's your thesis. All right, that there was some continuity, that there was this kind of change that happened from when colonists were just wanted to be have better representation in the parliament to now they want full independence. Okay, that's your argument. Once you've written your first paragraph, then you start writing your body paragraphs. All right, this is where you're going to get the meat of your points. But know that if you get those first 2 points in the first paragraph, you're already ahead of a lot of other students. The average on these DBQs is about a 2, so you'll be way above them. But your body paragraphs, okay, choose one of your categories, any of the three, make that into your topic sentence. Okay, always start with the topic sentence. For example, the early half of the 1763 to 1783, the British colonists viewed themselves as British people. Oh, where did they get that? Look at the very first thing they said, although most colonists identified as part of the British people. So what is this paragraph going to argue? That early on, colonists felt that they were British. Okay? So that's the topic sentence. Then put your 2 or 3 documents that are in there that they have given you that prove that. Make sure when you use the documents that you are describing them, that you are using them to support your argument, and that you are giving some sort of sourcing on there. So that's the HIP, historical situation, intended audience, point of view, or purpose. So we'll look at that here in a second. And then make sure in that discussion that you're explaining how it proves your topic sentence. Okay? At the end of the paragraph, give me another example. So another example of the colonists viewing themselves as British would be the fact that in the Stamp Act resolutions in the Virginia, House of Burgesses, they openly argued that that they just wanted better representation, right? Because the Stamp Act resolutions were not in the documents, therefore this would be a perfect example of an outside piece of evidence. And then transition to the next paragraph. So you can see that. So here's where they first used a document. For example, oh, beautiful. Just start with something that tells the reader that you're about to use one of the documents. Many religious leaders attempted to keep their congregations from revolting against the British. Here they have paraphrased document 4 for you. They don't quote. We don't quote in DBQs. They've paraphrased. Due to the First Great Awakening, oh, now they're giving me some historical situation. All right, and they explain the First Great Awakening. They also explain the Quakers. All right, and this gives me all sorts of historical situation and purpose here for document 4. Boom. And they're using their whole explanation is about how it led people to not want to divide from Britain. Okay? And then another example of the continued identification as British colonists can be seen amongst the higher class, which continues on. But then they explain how class created this divide amongst American colonists. All right, that's the DBQ. You write your 3 body paragraphs. You use your documents. You try to include complexity as much as you can throughout that, but make sure that you get all the other 6 points on there. Okay. How to write an LEQ. The last one. You have to write 1 LEQ. You'll have a choice of 3. So I'll give you. This is what you'll see. You'll see 3 different prompts. All the prompts deal with the same historical thinking skill, but they're different content. So evaluate the extent to which ideas of self-government influenced American colonial reaction to British imperial authority, evaluate the extent to which debates over slavery led to the Civil War, and evaluate the extent to which ideas about democracy contributed to the African American Civil Rights Movement. All of these are causation essays. How did this thing cause that? That's what it's asking. Okay? So pick the one you know the most about, because they're looking for the skill, not necessarily the content. All right, plan, take 5-10 minutes and really plan before you write. It will make your writing better, I promise you. Give a couple minutes at the end of everything to look over both your essays. And then write your 5-paragraph paper. You won't do this for college courses. You'll write much more complex papers with varying levels of paragraphs and things of that nature. But this is a timed essay, so go with what works. Start with your introduction paragraph. Your introductory paragraph with context and thesis, boom, 2 points. Then your body paragraph, do 2 or 3 of those. All right, the more body paragraphs, the more complexity you can fit in there. Make sure that you start each one with a topic sentence that directly comes from the thesis, and evidence and analysis with facts. All right, you have to have about 2 facts per paragraph is a good rule of thumb. And then focus on thinking skills. So if you're looking at number 4, which is how did ideas of democracy lead to or cause the African American civil rights or contribute to the African American civil rights movement, then make sure that you are really talking about causation. Okay. Conclusion if time. I'm not really worried about that. All right. So here's an example. This is a body paragraph from an LEQ. Again, this goes back to the democratic ideals and the African American civil rights movement. Democratic ideals were also used to fight for civil rights by influential African American leaders who used the laws and principles of America to achieve their goals. In the court case of Brown versus the Board of Education, check, there's one piece of fact. Thurgood Marshall argued on behalf of the students to exercise their democratic rights to challenge the law. See how they used that, and they explained how it was democracy. These students and Marshall achieved integration in the schools and gained access to their democratic right to education, overturning Plessy versus Ferguson. Martin Luther King, check, another fact, justified the African American struggle against oppression because he believed that every man was equal and entitled to equal opportunity. Something that is written in the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. All right, so boom, they've used facts, they've supported their argument, they have explained how his democratic ideals caused the civil rights movement and shaped it. So this is a well-written essay that would get you all the points, okay? The one thing you'd want to look at, of course, and want to get in there is some complexity. Complexity for the DBQ and LEQ, always think of it as, if I'm talking about a whole group of people, is every single person experiencing the same thing? No. So now it's about, explaining how various people are experiencing things in various ways. Okay? Or Brown versus the Board of Education fought for the integration of schools, but it took decades for it to actually be implemented, and white Americans, chose to take their kids out and put them in homeschool or private schools to fight integration. So there's some complexity. Okay. All right. As we finish up this video, I'm going to link this presentation on YouTube and also in Canvas and in the email that I'm sending you. My AP Classroom, go ahead, log in there. Everything is unlocked, so you can look at all sorts of essays and essay prompts and stuff like that. Essay prompts are great because you practice essay skills, but it also helps you with review because you're thinking about those things. I've also linked the SAQ, DBQ, and LEQs that College Board has released since 2015, so you can look at various examples and the scoring guidelines that go along with it. I've linked the rubrics that we used in class, and those rubrics come from Tom Ritchie, who also has some reviews out there. If you have any questions, I know this was fast, we went really quickly. If you have any questions, please contact me through WebEx or email. And then just want to let you know that you are ready for this. I believe that you are ready for this and that you're going to do well on Thursday. So goodbye and good luck.